Hi, this is Christopher Dragon, Music Director of your Wyoming Symphony Orchestra. Our upcoming concert, Triumph, celebrates us emerging from what has been a difficult few years with our largest orchestra yet. We open the concert with Nikolai Rimsky-Korsakov's Procession of the Nobles, which is from his work Mlada, composed in 1892. It was a kind of half opera, half ballet with an extremely complex storyline set 1,000 years ago in an imaginary kingdom. It is a work that has not really held the stage, and only the Procession of the Nobles is performed or heard today. It serves as the orchestral introduction to Act 2, which begins with a festival of tradespeople. The music opens with a rousing brass fanfare, a device which was often used to signal the entrance of royalty. This fanfare gives way to the main melody of the music, which is noble in character, first played by the horns, violins, and violas, accompanied by punctuated chords. Procession of the Nobles really highlights Rimsky-Korsakov's mastery of orchestration, meaning the way that he combines different instruments to paint colors, textures, and characters, and is an exciting opener for our concert of Triumph. Next we feature the two winners of our Young Artist Competition, which was made possible by Todd and Tammy Milliken, the Wyoming Cultural Trust Fund, and of course, Casper College. Our high school winner, Cooper Caligas, will be performing the fourth movement of the Cello Concerto by Edward Elgar, who was the most famous English composer of his time. This in itself is pretty remarkable, given that apart from having violin lessons, Elgar was mostly self-taught. The Cello Concerto was his last major orchestral work, composed in 1919, which was a time of pain for the composer coming out of the First World War. As a result, he turned away from his usual grandiose that we find in his Enigma Variations or Pomp and Circumstance marches for a more introspective and profoundly sad character. This Romantic era concerto is in 4 movements, which was unusual for the time. The fourth movement is where things really get going and is in a free rondo form, meaning there is a recurring refrain against contrasting sections. It begins with the orchestra taking up this main material, as if coming from a distance, until it breaks open to the solo cello with a quasi-recit, something you usually find in opera, meaning in a semi-spoken manner, allowing freedom for the soloist to make a statement. We then have a full statement of our refrain with our soloist and orchestra alternating roles. One of my favorite sections of this movement comes a little later, where the soloist joins forces with the lower strings of the orchestra, as well as the trombones, playing glissandi, which is a slide between notes, creating a moment of great gravitas and power. The The momentum of this movement morphs into a slow lyrical section reminiscent of the third movement, which is very much the heart of the concerto, providing an opportunity for the soloist to pull on those heartstrings once again. Elgar also revisits material from the very first movement, bringing us back to this bitter, painful music. However, this doesn't last long, as our main refrain material brings our concerto to a close. We then follow with our undergraduate winner, Alexis Di Paolo, who will be performing the first movement of Joseph Haydn's Cello Concerto No. 2. It was composed in 1783 for cellist Anton Kraft, who worked in Vienna and was close to Haydn. Actually, for some time it was believed that Kraft had composed the piece, however that was put to rest when a manuscript with Haydn's signature was later found. If you saw our January concert, you'll already be a little bit familiar with this composer as we performed his Surprise Symphony in that concert. As Haydn was a classical era composer, as you will hear, the music is all about balance and structure. The instrumentation is smaller, calling on strings and pairs of oboes and horns, and it is a 3-movement concerto. As was standard with the first movement of concertos from the classical period, the orchestra begins with a statement of the exposition where the main material occurs. You will hear this main melody introduced by the first violins. Although this orchestral introduction sets a leisurely tone for the concerto, there are bursts of virtuosity which you hear very soon after the solo cello takes up the material. As you can hear, it is a totally different sound world to Elgar's Cello Concerto, with the orchestra acting as a much more accompanying role when the soloist is playing. We then have an orchestral statement bringing us to the development section, where the material we heard previously is explored further. During it, we hear the soloist wander into the minor key, turning the leisurely material into something quite sorrowful. Even the bursts of virtuosity have an added element of drama to them, until the orchestra finally brings us back to the joyous realm of D major, the recapitulation, where we hear all the opening material once again, plus a cadenza, an opportunity to allow the soloist to shine with no restraints. So I hope you enjoy our mini cello festival featuring these two contrasting concertos, performed by some of Wyoming's young, bright talent. We close our concert with Pictures at an Exhibition by Modest Mussorgsky, a piece originally for piano that has become one of the most orchestrated and arranged pieces of music. We will be performing the orchestrated version by the French composer Maurice Ravel, who adds a level of color, brilliance, and imagination that has truly cemented its popularity today. The work is based on paintings by the artist, architect, and designer Victor Hartmann, who was a close friend of Mussorgsky. Hartmann's untimely death at the age of only 39 caused the composer deep despair, resulting in Mussorgsky writing this work in memoriam of his friend. The work illustrates 10 of Hartmann's paintings, placing the listener at an exhibition, promenading from picture to picture, of which you'll hear begins in the solo trumpet. This promenade reoccurs numerous times throughout the piece, based on the same melody, but each time with a different character. We will now go through the movements that are based on these 10 paintings. The first, Gnomus or Gnome, was really a caricature, a design for a nutcracker. Ravel's colors are menacing, featuring rumbling in the lowest strings and a grotesque, eerie effect from the string slides. Our next painting, The Old Castle, depicts a medieval castle with a solitary troubadour. Mussorgsky places the castle in Italy with a lilting Sicilian rhythm, long, short, long, short. But the melody has a mournful character which Ravel gives to the saxophone, an instrument you do not often hear or see in orchestral pieces. The Tuileries painting depicts a group of children in the palace gardens. Ravel perfectly captures this in the music through the light twirling woodwinds. In Bydlo, the ox, Ravel departs from Mussorgsky's original dynamics, and instead it starts soft with a slow crescendo meaning to get louder, representing the approach and passing of an ox-drawn wagon. The design that inspired Mussorgsky's imaginary ballet of the chicks in their shells is a whimsical egg costume. Ravel sets the scene with chirping flutes, fluttering violin trills, and the staccato tapping of chicks at their shells. Samuel Goldenberg and Schmuel is a pair of portraits depicting two Jewish men, one rich and one poor. Goldenberg appears first, assertive and powerful, with Ravel's full strings. And casts a stuttering trumpet as Schmuel. As the movement progresses, you hear both of these themes unite. The next sketch is of old women quarreling at the market in the French town of Limoges, which is the title of the movement. Here, the quarreling is depicted by the very sudden bursts and constant sudden changes in the music. Our next painting shows Hartmann himself looking at the Paris catacombs, the inspiration for the next two movements. The catacombs are presented by a progression of dissonant chords in the brass. It is followed by With the Dead in a Dead Language, which evokes our promenade theme in a minor key against shivering high strings. The final pair of pictures brings the music to a climax. The hut on Fowl's legs, referencing Baba Yaga, a fearsome witch who lives on the edge of the forest. And so, as you'll hear, the music is threatening and ferocious. This leads straight into the glorious Great Gates of Kiev, the triumphant climax of the entire piece and the triumphant conclusion to our first complete season coming out of the pandemic. We are so grateful to have also partnered with Wyoming Dementia Care and Mountain Plaza Assisted Living for an art class centered around pictures at an exhibition. Participants met with WSO musician Richard Turner, who shared the history and imagery of the work, while participants created original pieces of art listening to the music. So on your way out of the concert, please take a moment to view that artwork, which is being displayed in the lobby. And with that, please enjoy the WSO's closing concert of Triumph.